Hey guys, Tisha here. Welcome back to another chapter read of Counting the Cost. This is chapter 8, Pushed Aside. 2017 ended badly. 2018 started worse. We received news from the missionary organization that we'd been hoping to serve with. They've been waiting almost a year for us to provide some kind of legal confirmation that we were no longer bound by contract that I'd signed the day before my wedding day. So TLC and her father are playing in Jill and her husband's faces because they had plenty of time to get that information to them on whether or not she was still legally bound. But they did not want her to go without punishment. And I feel like that's what this is. But we'll continue to read to see what she says. Despite us asking Pops, Chad, and the network repeatedly, either for a release or at least a full copy of the contract itself, we still had nothing to show them other than the typed up bullet points which Chad had shared, telling us that the contract ran for 5 years until June 2019, and the partial contract pages from Pops that didn't give us all the information we needed. We lost the Panama job, and they kept us on their reserve list for as long as they could, but time had run out. If we ever did get free and wanted to serve with them, we'd have to reapply and go through the process all over again, which would take years. That's so inconsiderate of her father. And you're telling me that these people don't deserve to be sued after they played around with their kids like this? Oh yes, they very much deserve to be sued. TLC too. We were devastated. The mission field had been the one place where I felt free, and I had been so sure that we were called to serve there. We'd already waited a year, and with Pops refusing to cooperate, we would have to wait another year and a half before we could even think about getting out of the contract and serving with the mission organization, if they'd have us again. Neither Derek nor I felt able to put our lives on hold for that long. I was upset. A while later, I finally told my mom about losing the job, and eventually Pops found out. Like he didn't already know. He was part of the reason why they didn't get the job. So if he comes back and acts like he's concerned, I'd have punched him. Never mind. Oh, goodness. We were together one evening when he brought it up. You should have told me, he said. I'm sure we could have worked something out. They asked you multiple times for the contract. So why does he gaslight them so much by saying things like that? I bit my lip so hard I thought I might draw blood. No, Pop, said Derek. That's not the point. You are entitled to know what's going on in our lives. What would have been most helpful would have been to stick up for us to TLC, explain everything to them, and get us released from the contract. Around the same time, he texted us, finally giving us just a small but crucial piece of the puzzle: the date when the contract expired. It wasn't 2019 after all. It was June 2018. Wow. We were both shocked and upset because that's when they got told that that's messed up. Our future had been affected yet again by lack of transparency, by Pops operating on a need-to-know basis. If we'd known about the expiration date for the contract, then maybe the missions organization would have held on just a little longer. If Pops had been transparent with us earlier, then maybe we might have been able to get back on the mission field without delay. And maybe if we told Pops about everything that had been going on with the IMB earlier, then he would have helped sooner. No, he wouldn't have. Because he knew there was a reason why you wanted that information. He wouldn't have helped. But neither of us had wanted to give him that level of control over our lives or open the possibility of him making contact with the IMB directly and trying to use his influence to persuade them to bend the rules for us. We wanted to stand on our own 2 feet, as you should, because your father is not to be trusted. For a while, we considered making contact with the organization again to see if this new information changed anything, but we decided against it. They probably felt like dealing with them was more of a hassle than anything, and they probably wouldn't have wanted that at that time anyways, because if it took over a year for them to get that simple release, I wouldn't be like running to work with them. Just me personally. We still didn't have factual proof of all the information, no contract in hand, just a text message. Derek had taken the LSAT and applied to law school, and he just heard that he'd been accepted. Derek is doing everything. The way we saw it, a little legal training might be beneficial for us both in the future. The lawsuit that my sisters and I initiated against the people who had released the investigation was still in the early stages. In Touch had filed a successful motion to be dismissed from the lawsuit, and we were discovering that as public figures, we weren't allowed as much protection as private figures, though we still hoped to maybe prove later that the intentional mishandling of juvenile records, which could bring them back into the suit down the road. I think that that's messed up, that just because someone is famous, that they don't get some of the same protection. If anything, they should have more, because they're going to be scrutinized that much more, and that information is just going to be up for usage. It's just not right. Not when it comes to stuff like that. The city and the county and their defendants were filing appeals on parts of their suits, but things were still rolling there, slowly but surely. We tried to put the ending of our IMB plans behind us, but after Easter, things flared up again. Derek had been making comments on Twitter, speaking his mind about various topics and making a few enemies. It earned him a quiet conversation with Pops and a warning. Be careful, he said. If you've got problems, come to me. Neither of us felt much like taking him up on his offer at first. We tried that before and it didn't go over well. So instead, we did what we could to swallow our frustration and try to avoid doing anything else that would inflame Pops. But when the problems continue, we thought it best to not just sweep them under the rug and continue pretending. We decided to take Pop's advice about coming to him with our problems, but not in person this time. Based on our recent history and wanting a little buffer, we decided to put our thoughts down in a letter. Okay, so another letter when he never responded to that text that she sent him about her nose piercing. You're going to send him another letter. We took days working on it. We tried hard to make sure that it was clear and free from too much emotion. We just wanted to list everything that had troubled us, to make sure that Mom and Pops had the best chance possible of understanding where we were at and what we were feeling. What started out as a page or two quickly expanded. We added paragraph after paragraph of things we really wanted to get resolved. It was long letter, 27 pages in total. And by the time we finished it, we were worn out. Instead of sleeping on it or checking it over, we decided to send it just as it was. Besides, we were away on a trip to Texas as a family with Derek's ministry program. So it seemed like the perfect opportunity to have a little extra physical distance between us two. We were relieved and somewhat confused when Pops emailed back a short reply, not answering the questions we'd asked, but apologizing for, in quotes, all of the ways that my actions and controlling spirit and lack of sensitivity and lack of communication have hurt you and Jill. That's so passive aggressive. He thanked us for bringing it to his attention, asked for prayer, and begged for our forgiveness, adding that he loved us very much. Then just as summer began, we came home one day to a letter, and that was when everything finally fell apart. It was from the IRS. So to me, it was just another letter from the government that was hard to understand and easy to ignore. Ever since I could remember, Pop CPA had filed my taxes for me. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. You had, oh, Lord. Sorry, y'all. And don't mind my nail polish is chipping, y'all. Why would you use their CPA? Why? You can't just let anybody mess with your money. Oh, okay. Ever since I could remember, Pop CPA had filed my taxes for me and for both Derek and I together for the first couple years of marriage until we got someone else to do our taxes. And so my initial instincts were to send it on to him. Derek thought otherwise. His degree from OSU was in accounting, and he spent 1.5 years working in the tax department at Walmart HQ, so he studied the letter carefully. What is it, I asked. I don't know yet, but I don't like it. In the days that followed, Derek tackled the letter like he was a forensic accountant. We emailed Pop's CPA nonchalantly asking for copies of all my tax records since I'd become an adult. Once we had those, Derek created spreadsheets, looked back over old tax returns, and did what he could to decode the mystery. Finally, he figured it out and sat me down to explain it all. I bet you that this man, her father, has made it seem like all these years she's been receiving income and hasn't reported it. That's the only thing I could possibly think of. But let's see. Finally, he figured out to set me down and explain it all. Remember the $80,000 that Pops paid you? Yeah. I think your dad's accountant has been telling the IRS that you've been receiving income from the show that you haven't actually been paid. What about the $80,000? Doesn't that cover it? Nope. As far as I can tell, over the last 10 years, income from Mad Family Inc. that you've declared to the IRS is way higher than that. How much? Derek checked his spreadsheet again. About $130,000 more. You guys. She got an $80,000 check. And he's saying it's so she's supposed to have $210,000 that's unaccounted for? That she was paid with only getting an $80,000 check? We followed up with Pop's CPA via email, asking him to help explain two things: how Pops had reached the $80,000 figure in the first place, and why there was such a vast difference between that and what had been declared on our returns. The fact that we had waited years to see a copy of the contract and we were still waiting meant that neither of us held out much hope for a quick or detailed reply. His response did come soon, though I really think the CPA was in the dark on a lot of it, because his answer seemed to show that he thought we'd been aware of more than we actually were. Pops wasn't offering too much help either, though he did dodge the question and gave us some unsolicited advice. It's important not to live off your life savings, but to reinvest it, he said. Jason bought a house and fixed it up, and now is reselling it. What? What does that have to do with the price of tea in China? I hope I did that saying right. What does that have to do with anything? You're telling them about a house when they're trying to figure out where this extra $130,000 came from that they never received? Jason bought a house and fixed it up and now is reselling it. You guys could do the same. Instead of paying rent, buy a house and fix it up. That would save you rent and multiply your savings. He also said that he noticed within us a spirit of ungratefulness. It seemed clear to me that he didn't like us questioning his financial decisions. Typically, he'd have been a little smoother trying to win us over, but now he sounded like he had enough, like we exhausted his patience and he couldn't wait for the emails to end and for us to stop asking questions so he could move on. Derek tactfully tried to explain that if we in fact had income, we would like to tithe on it. He said he had already paid the taxes and tithed our portion. Pops explained that if we wanted to tithe on our income, then he would have to kick some families to whom he was giving free rent out of their homes. Oh my goodness, this man is the king of manipulation. What we wanted most was transparency and to figure out why I hadn't been paid what had been reported to the government. Pop's reply contained a question of his own. Derek, what amount do you feel like you and Jill are owed? It wasn't meant to be a question that invited an answer. It seems like it was a challenge. As the emails between us and Pops continued, it felt like he was daring us to say a number, daring us to show him disrespect. It wasn't like him to be so harsh, and I wasn't used to feeling such coldness coming off of him, because your father only wanted you around for the money. Simple as that. I don't know what other way to say it. She gives him a lot more credit than she does. I understand that that's her father and she still loves him. But the fact that he did what he did to her and did it so calculating, and it's disgusting. The girl's been through so much, and here you are robbing her and getting her in trouble with the government that you wanted to be a part of. Because didn't he run for office? Isn't that what we were told? I love Pops and hated the conflict, so part of me just wanted to give up. I wondered if this was all even worth the fight. I just wish we could have handled this civilly without things getting so heated. Not when it comes to that. Not when you risk my freedom, the stability of my kids and my husband. No. The 4th of July was just around the corner. And for the first time ever, Derek and I agreed not to join in on the annual celebrations at a friend's house where I knew my parents would be in attendance. It felt like a big decision, and we needed to put a little space between us. I'd hoped that if we could just give some space and let things cool down a little, things might improve. Not when it comes to that. A period of space wasn't my only idea. First, I asked Mom and Pops whether they'd be willing to meet with a mediator to help us talk through some of the issues in a constructive way. They agreed and even said they'd be happy for us to pick the mediator and set the time. I appreciated that and hoped that after a couple of weeks, we'd be able to all sit together and work things out. My plan hit a hurdle early on. I had asked my church to recommend some people to facilitate the meeting, and they'd given me 3 names of people who could sit with all of us and mediate. Finding a time that they could all make work was difficult, so it got narrowed to just 2 of the 3. Then Derek started law school in August, which added more pressure to our lives and schedule. Finally, we settled on a date the first week of October, but at the last minute, the other mediator had to drop out, leaving just one. I had gone 3 months without seeing Pops or going over to the big house at all. It was strange, and I felt estranged from the family, but it was easier to stay away rather than spend time with everyone and try to pretend like everything was just fine. And I'm wondering if she talked to any of her siblings about all of this stuff, or if any other of her other siblings experienced some of what she's going through. I mean, I guess we won't know because a lot of them had NDAs, but I'm just saying. I was nervous when we arrived at the church for our meeting. We were early and talked briefly with a friend of Derek's from the School of Ministry who was waiting outside. She had tattoos and a nose piercing, but I also knew she was a big fan of the show. When the mediator arrived, we went inside and waited for Mom and Pops. Pops had a wide smile when he walked through the door as we exchanged awkward greetings and hugs. Pops held his phone out. "Look at this," he said. Derek, the mediator, and I moved to look as Pops pressed play on a video he just recorded. It was the girl from outside, and her smile was even bigger than Pops. She was saying how her life before had been so full of sin, but watching the show had helped her change. So let me show you this clip to make you feel guilted and to make you feel like my stance is right and yours isn't. So here's a video of this girl saying that my life changed because of us, even though I'm a hypocrite. Got it. She started wearing skirts and signed up for the School of Ministry so that she could be near the Duggars. And now to actually be meeting Pops and Mom in person, it was such a great day for her. "Isn't that great?" Pops said, eyes wide and sparkling as he looked at each of us. "She's so sweet." So her father wants to be another Gothard. Another Mr. Gothard. That's what he wants to be, because you're enjoying this fame and all this other stuff when really your show thrived, not because of you, but because of your children and your wife. It was nothing new. Ever since he got a smartphone, Pops had been taking video of anyone he met who complimented him on the show and how it had made a positive impact on their lives. Then he shared with the rest of the family on the group text. To him, it was a way of encouraging people, a reminder of what the ministry was all about. In the past, I would probably have agreed, but this time it just stung. Watching him pour out praise on the girl with the tattoos and the nose ring. How could he have such a problem with me wearing pants and having my nose pierced, yet appeared to overlook whatever this girl had done to her body? I shook it off and tried to focus. Derek and I had prepared, and I checked the note on my phone for the things we wanted to discuss. That it's not sinful for a woman who fears the Lord to wear pants, have a nose ring, or cut her hair. That Pops wasn't just disorganized or forgetful when he had me sign the contract without seeing it. It was deliberate deception. Good. We want Pops to be fully transparent by finally sharing the 2014 contract with us and telling us about any other agreements that affect us. Pops can make things right by paying us the full amount that his accountant has reported on my tax returns, totaling $130,249.98. When Derek and I had been talking in the days and weeks leading up to this meeting, those 4 points had seemed like the most basic things we wanted to agree on. They seemed reasonable and possible at the time, and I'd let myself imagine how good it would have felt to reach a resolution on them all. But sitting in the room with the mediator introducing himself and thanking us for being there, and Pops looking confident and strong, like he did nothing in the nothing in the world could ever touch him, I felt different. Oh, Jill, don't back down. So when the mediator invited me to go first, I put the 4 points out of my mind and just tried to say what I thought would help. Jill, I'm sorry it took so long for this meeting to happen, I said. My voice was shaking a little, and I could feel the breath stutter in my lungs. There have been some very hurtful things that have happened, and so we wanted to sort it all out, to have a good discussion together. We love y'all, and I know we all hope to be able to restore family relationships very soon. In the time I've spoken, Pop's body language had shifted. He wasn't smiling from the video and the girl outside anymore. Instead, he was sitting very still, lips tight, eyes locked in a scowl that had been sculpted out of a rock. The letter you guys sent us, he stopped, like he was lost and didn't know where to go. He looked at Mom, she looked at me. There was no scowl on her face, no folded arms, just a look of pain, the pain of a mama torn from her baby. It was the most disrespectful thing I've ever read. Her voice was soft, but her words hit me harder than anything she'd ever said to me. Okay, so her mother finds it disrespectful that Jill is calling out the hypocrisies. I thought it was Jim Bob talking, but she said her, so it was her mom that said that. Wow. I knew she was right, that she was speaking the truth. No, it wasn't disrespectful. I didn't know exactly how I messed up, but I knew that I'd hurt her and Pops, and that was never my intention. I heard Derek try to explain that we never meant for the letter to be taken that way. I looked at Pops. He was still scowling. I'm sorry, I said. We love y'all and could have used more care. The problem with when you write things, or when you text things, is that you read it sometimes in the way that it wasn't intended to be read. But regardless of whatever way that they read that letter that Jill and them sent, it wasn't disrespectful. What was disrespectful is how many times these people manipulated her and weren't worried about her. And I'm including Michelle in it too. Michelle is just as bad. She might be slightly brainwashed, but she's just as bad. Because at what point do you realize that you all did wrong? We wrote the letter together and had hoped it would help explain our feelings. But I know, oh, wait a second. That must be the 27-page letter. I stand corrected. Maybe it was disrespectful, but they deserve it.
Sorry, I don't understand.
I'm not talking to you. But I know we kept adding to it, and then we were tired and just figured we had better go ahead and send it along. Okay, so they're not talking about the letter we saw. They're talking about the 27-page letter that they wrote them. My voice trailed off as I tried to find the right words, but Pops wasn't listening to me. He had his own list of things he wanted to talk about. You sent me a text message, Jill. You said I was verbally abusing you. I was so offended by that too. You know in your heart that that's not right. Are you going to apologize for that? No, because you were verbally abusing her. And the way that you're talking to her now is somewhat abusive as well. Because why do you think that you could sit there and say the things that you say? Just because you're passively aggressive about something doesn't mean you aren't being aggressive. I was nervous now. I remember the message, remembered sending it in the hope that it might wake Pops up to how bad I felt things had gotten, to maybe make him give us a little space and let things calm down. I'd written about not wanting to be verbally abused, which was exactly how I felt at the time. I felt it in El Salvador as well. I wasn't sure that I could apologize for that. I glanced at Derek as I remained speechless. Pops must have sensed what I was thinking because he suddenly stood up. "You're not gonna apologize? Really?" His voice was loud, and there was an edge to it that I'd rarely heard. The moderator looked pale and was stuck on mute. Derek tensed, and I could feel him getting ready to step in. I squeezed his hand, hoping he'd get the message. "Hold back. Please be quiet. Don't let this get any worse than it already is." We were sitting in a horseshoe formation, the moderator in the middle, with the Dillards and the Duggars facing each other from opposite couches, open space between us. Pops took a step towards me, closing the gap. It wasn't a gesture of reconciliation. It was an act of aggression. "Derek, what you gonna do?" "Derek, what you gonna do? I need to know, Derek. I need you to know." He towered over me, his whole body fueled with anger. My face flushed red, my eyes filled with tears. Then there was a long, awful silence that I wanted to fill, but just couldn't yet. Derek's hand was shaking in mine, and I squeezed it as hard as I ever had, desperate for him to hold his tongue. "You know why you're crying, don't you? Your conscience is talking to you. That's why." Pop's voice was so loud in my ears. Okay, so we're not going to act like this is an abuse, that this isn't the very thing that she was talking about. "Mediator, what are you doing?" His words were like blows. I instinctively tried to protect myself and block him out. I curled up on my seat, trying to find safety in some kind of fetal position. "You're guilty!" Exclamation point, y'all. Pops was yelling, stabbing his finger at me, standing up right over me. I'm going to tell y'all like this. I don't do well with what she's describing here. I am not one of those people. I don't do well. I've been through too much stuff to have any man or female stand over top of me in the way that she's describing. And he better be happy that he did this to his daughter, because other people don't take this kind of disrespect. And he's sitting there calling her guilty and saying all those other things while he's towering over her, being abusive, being an aggressor. Mom started crying. Derek tried to speak, but I pulled him back. "Jill, I need you to stop. I need you to stop holding your man back." "Let him go, Jill. Let him go." Derek tried to speak, but I pulled him back. "You want to know why I'm crying?" My voice was cracked, my eyes burning. "Is that you think I'm some kind of horrible person just because I wear pants and have a nose ring. And yet you see that girl outside and praise her. That's why I'm crying, Daddy. I'm evolving and changing just like that girl out there, but you can't see it. You treat me like I'm a prodigal who's just turned her back on you. You treat me worse than you treat my pedophile brother." Yes, girl, yes. Sorry, y'all, I'm getting hype. Good job, Jill. Good job, because it's true. Didn't we've all said it in the comment section. We said it chapters ago that they protect this guy that sat there and did what he did to their daughters, and they shield him, and then they protect him again when he goes out there and he commits adultery and he cheats on his wife, and you send him away to some type of rehabilitation place, and you protect him and make sure no paparazzi gets photographs and all those other stuff, but you put your other two daughters to represent the many people that he violated and speak on behalf of their parents. Some parents, they're both trash, Michelle and him. And Michelle, at some point, she needs to gain a backbone and care about her kids. Pops looked stunned. "Well," he stammered. I wonder whether he was about to agree with me, to confirm that in his mind, my sins of disobedience really were as bad as what Josh had been doing. But finally, the moderator spoke up. "I think we should take a break." The moderator is trash. The mediation meeting had lasted 3 hours of raised voices, flowing tears from my mother and me, and not much in the way of resolution. We didn't even get to ask about the money situation or some of the other things we'd hoped to discuss. By the time it was over, my head was pounding. My heart felt like it had been beaten raw. It was almost impossible to concentrate, but I heard clearly what the mediator said to Derek and me once Mom and Pops left. You need professional help. Yes, you do. We agreed and began searching for a therapist right away. We found someone quickly. We'll call him Mr. Ray McIntosh, a silver-haired licensed Christian therapist who had a space for us in his calendar. Derek was all in from the moment we made our initial appointment, but I had some baggage to work through. A therapist is just someone you're paying to be your friend. I'd heard it said often when I was growing up, and it was on repeat in my head. The way that these people... So she talked to us about how she had counseling, but it was through the court. I guarantee you that once they did whatever psychological evaluations that they needed to do for the purposes of the case, that was it. That her parents didn't further do anything, because her saying that lets you know that they didn't value therapy. So too was Pops warning us repeatedly about talking to people outside of the family about anything to do with either the show or the family. They might not understand, and they might not be in line with the IBLP teachings. It was the old umbrella of protection again, making me terrified of thinking for myself. Like the fallout of a nuclear blast, I was beginning to hate the way the IBLP umbrella principle continued to affect me. I hated how much of a hold it still had on my life, even though I tried to tackle it so many times before. I hated the fact that I was still having to deal with it. I wish I could sort things out, and I was tired of the toll it was taking on me emotionally. I wanted help, but I was scared to be one of those people, the kind who look to the world to solve their problems instead of God. It wasn't all bad. Just when things were at their bleakest, Samuel was due for his 18-month checkup, the one that would determine whether he had sustained any long-term brain damage at birth. The results, according to the neurologist, were conclusive. There was no lasting sign at all of any brain damage from his birth. Amen. It was a rare piece of good news, and it left me ecstatic for days. That had to be so relieving, because the trauma that she went through to go through that, but her baby is good. That's so good. By the time we walked into our first therapy session, I was ready to talk, the words tumbling out of both of us, while our therapist sat and listened, occasionally steering us back on course. At the end of the session, Ray delivered his verdict. I've tried to do those group mediation sessions before, and they are very hard to do. It's not easy to keep up. Lord, I'm making all types of words. It's not easy to keep a handle on the room, and it can easily turn into a shouting match. Yeah, I said, my mind flashing back to me curled up on the chair while Pops jabbed his finger in time with his shouting, and our first mediator just sitting silent and stunned. I would recommend that you guys see a therapist, whether it's me or somebody else, for a few sessions. Your parents can see someone else as well. And when you're ready, you can sign something to allow the two therapists to talk and help be the go-betweens for a while. Then maybe you can eventually meet together with your parents. But I don't know if I recommend that. It sounded good, and we shared the plan with Mom and Pops. To their credit, they contacted their own therapist that Mr. McIntosh had recommended and had a session together. But the more time we spent in therapy ourselves, the more it became clear to us that we were a long, long way from being able to be put in a place that solutions that would fix our relationship with my parents. First, we had to understand how deep our wounds went and how much healing was needed. People were starting to notice that something was up. Bloggers and tabloids and people on social media had spotted that Derek and I hadn't appeared in any photos posted by the family for months. The longer we stayed hidden, the more rumors spread. It didn't help that TLC never aired our exit interview, and there was no announcement of us leaving. We had just disappeared from the show without any of the exit interview footage behind us, so people speculated. Some people said we've been fired from the show. Others said it was all because of Derek's Twitter comments. That's true. there were a lot of speculations about that. One thread I saw was all about how Derek had obviously ordered me to start wearing pants because Ginger had gotten so much attention for it, and Derek was just desperate to be noticed. Goodness gracious. It was all ridiculous, and for Derek and me, it was easy enough to ignore. For Pops, it was another matter. Anything that damaged the show damaged him, so he seemed anxious to get back into the mediation, to make things right between us all, and have us back over to the big house again, just like old times. You can't put a timeline on healing, said our therapist when we asked him how long it was going to take before we were ready to meet with Mom and Pops again. That is so true. That is so true. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't realize. I think a lot of people think that once you talk about it a couple times, that's supposed to be it. But you're talking about years of damage and years of deception and years of hurt and pain. So of course, this is going to take her a while to walk through. You're just going to have to tell them that at this point, we don't know when you'll be ready. Good for her therapist protecting them. I think we need to focus your energies on your own healing right now. It was good advice, the kind that makes you exhale with relief. Finally, we had someone on our side. And after all those years of having to fit in with whatever schedule worked for the show, I could say no. I could follow my own timetable. Even in just a few sessions, Ray had helped us to see how to communicate more effectively with Pops. We realized that the long letter we written in the summer had been all kinds of wrong. We put way too many accusations in it, and we hadn't owned how we felt about it. There was no way for Pops to read it and to not feel offended. So when I sent a message to Pops and Mom about when we'd be ready to meet again, I took our therapist's advice. I explained that I felt like we needed some time to work on ourselves, apologized for the fact that everything was taking longer than we hoped again, and thanked them for being willing to work with us. It was good to feel empowered like this, and I was fine with waiting as long as it took for Derek and myself to heal. But there was one issue that we couldn't put on hold indefinitely, which is money, right? Because you still got your tax stuff and you still don't really have money from work. Back when Derek had enrolled in Oklahoma State University as a teenager, his mom and dad had given him some great advice. Apply for every grant, every scholarship possible. He did exactly what they said and sent out almost hundreds of letters, applications, and essays to various boards and nonprofits and foundations that he had a chance of receiving financial aid from. They started rolling in, including $20,000 from OSU, nearly $10,000 from the Buck Foundation, and $1,000 from the local Walmart neighborhood market. He ended up getting almost half of the cost covered, saving himself tens of thousands of dollars over the course of his degree. Naturally, when he enrolled in law school over a decade later, Derek took the same approach. With 2 kids under 4 at home and a wife who wasn't working, money was even tighter than it had been before. He needed all the grants he could get, so he began applying. It didn't take long for him to realize that all the money that Pop's accountant had declared on my tax returns made it look like we had way more cash than we actually did. Gracious. It didn't matter that we had never been paid the $132,249.98, which had been declared. As far as these trusts and foundations were concerned, our tax returns told the story that we didn't need much financial help. While that was frustrating, that wasn't even our biggest worry. We worried more about what we still didn't know about our finances, the contract, and the previous taxes with Pops. We had been pushing Pops to pay us the bare minimum ever since the summer, and we had hoped to reach an agreement in the mediation session, but we hadn't even discussed it. There had been more follow-up emails and texts. We got an email from him a couple weeks later, and as I read the opening lines, I felt genuinely surprised. Jill and Derek, we love you both and want to see our differences resolved. I've been praying and fasting about all of this. I need to share my heart with you. I've made some bad decisions along life's way and have hurt you all. I'm sorry about that. Y'all, I still don't trust it. I was wrong for things I've said and done, and I pray you will please forgive me. It was a good start. Maybe he had a change of heart, and was actually going to reconcile with us after all. But the further I read, the worse I felt, of course. Yes, we allocated at different times amounts to our children for tax purposes because each of our children were benefiting from having all of their needs met. Oh, no, he didn't. Oh, no, he didn't. Oi, 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 oi. Okay. Y'all about to be pissed right along with me. He's basically charging them for what he's supposed to do as a parent. Let me keep reading. Food, clothing, shelter, utilities, music lessons, education, travel, instruments, vehicles, phones, medical insurance, medical bills, etc. Here are some low numbers of what was approximately spent on Jill in the last few years. Apartment rate rent, $750 times 24 months, that's $18,000. Utilities discounted, $600 times 36, that comes to $21,600. Midwife education, $5,000. Honda Pilot, $9,000. HARP. He put the HARP that he bought all those girls when they wrote their book as an expense, y'all. It says HARP, $15,000. Furniture, $5,000. If you don't want the furniture, we'll buy it back after 4 years of use for $3,000. Cell phone, $50 a month, $50 times 120 months, that's $6,000. Car insurance, $50 per month for 8 years, that's $4,800. Vehicle fuel for 8 years, that's about $50 a month, so we're gonna save $4,800. Eating out, $100 month with family debit card for 8 years, $9,600. The family debit card that they're told to use by him when they go places as a family, he's now charging her for that too. Clothes and Goodwill on family debit cards, $1,000 per year for 8 years. That's $8,000. Eating at home, $3 per day for 12 years, $13,140. I cannot believe that he had the gall to write this out. If this does not show how demented he is, what else will? Give to the Dillard Family Ministries, $10,000. You paid yourself a salary from this. Started there was only $1,200 left when you closed it out, so you must have eventually received it. You can refund this ministry gift, and we will give it to you directly if you want us to. That's what, $129,940 is just the beginning of Jill's expenses paid by the Duggar family over the last several years. Most was made and spent on Jill before you two were married. I've never had my parents charge me for my existence. If I go and spend time with my father, let me change it that. As grown as I am, when my father comes into town and we go out to eat and we go do stuff, do you think I have to pull out my card for anything? No, I don't. That's one of the many reasons I love when my daddy comes to town. My father took my son for a couple weeks this summer. He came and got him. He paid for his plane ticket. He paid for all his food. He paid for his hotel stay, all of that stuff. Do you think I had to pay for any of that? And here you have this man who's her actual father charging her for her existence? Oh, goodness. Also taking into account many other ways that we have spent money to help you all. For example, installing the AC in your home in El Salvador, the stove, the washing machine, etc. The total on Jill's tax returns was $130,250. We would be willing to write a check for $20,000 to settle this once and all for you all. Jill, when Mom and I pass on, you are set to receive 1/19 of everything we own that is set up in a trust for you kids. If you attack us, probably your inheritance will be lowered significantly. That's a threat. I love you, but I'm grieved by the disrespect and the accusations that continue. I have asked for your forgiveness, and I hope that you will also. You have deeply offended your mother and I. So he doesn't really forgive. He's still trying to guilt her. We love you and forgive you for all the things that you have said and done. 20,000 is a one-time offer. Take it or leave it. Please let me know by Monday night or the amount will be zero. Love, Daddy Duggar. For all the progress we were making in therapy, for all the desires we had to be on good terms with family and work things out, that email set us back a long way. It felt cold, it felt brutal, it hurt. It seems Pops wasn't being generous when we thought he was being generous in the past. He was showing us Proverbs 23, 1-8 in action. It was clear that Pops was not only counting the cost of bringing me into the world, he was set on denying our request. We couldn't just continue the cat and mouse game. We already spent emotionally, and we knew if we didn't move to protect ourselves and remedy the situation, it would only get worse. We couldn't live like that forever, so we decided to act. In late October, we hired an attorney who sent a formal demand letter to Pops asking for the 2014 contract, as well as copies of the Mad Family Inc. bylaws, minutes, and other details that I, as a shareholder, should have already had and seen. Pops went ballistic. First, he hit the phone. There were texts and voicemails and calls every day, but in none of them did he give the answers requested. Instead, he was calling for us to get things resolved, to move on, and to work things out. We told him that we wanted to do that too, and that all he had to do was communicate through our attorney with the information requested. He didn't. Then came the next wave. A consolidated effort from several of my siblings. They hit the phone, sending voicemails and texts all day long, each one pleading with us to get it resolved. When that didn't work, some of my siblings started visiting, even though they weren't spending time with them before. Now you want to spend time with her. They'd want to spend hours talking it through, trying to figure out what our problem was and why we weren't doing what Pops wanted. I felt obligated to at least hear them out and show them we care by listening. I could just about cope with the daytime visits, but when they wanted to stay up until midnight talking with Derek and me, when Derek had law school exams the next day, we finally told them no. What? How come you won't talk, they say. This is way more important than law school. No, it's not. We could see what was going on. Early in 2017, Pops had started paying small, non-negotiable amounts per episode to those who were filming, both to spouses and siblings. It seemed to me as if they had been brainwashed into thinking that they weren't owed anything and that the $80,000 payment had been super generous, that they should be nothing but grateful for all the gifts and good favors he was giving them. There were strings attached though, like having to pile on Derek and me when we caused trouble, but it seemed like nearly none of them were willing to question what Pops was doing. They were still so terrified of stirring up dissension among the brethren that they went along with almost everything. Not every visit was designed to apply pressure, though. One of my siblings came alone and told us what was really going on. Pops is telling everyone that if we don't stand against you both on this, then we're standing against him. He said none of us can be neutral here and that it affects us all. He said we might all be sued as a result of what you're doing. When my sibling left, I cried. It was one thing for Pops to be angry at Derek and me, but how could he justify bringing his other children into it like this? Yeah, isn't he stirring up dissension? How could he mislead them into thinking they might be sued when he knew fully well that it was Mad Inc. Family Corporation we were dealing with, not our siblings? It made me sad for him. It made me scared for them. I would have been sad for him. Our attorney told us to stay calm and write it out, calmly repeating our demands when Pops refused to cooperate. For him, it was standard lawyer stuff, but for me, it was a nightmare. I wasn't coping so well. I'd feel a fear-spiked adrenaline rush kicking every time my phone screen lit up with the Duggar family name. That's anxiety. Each knock on the door felt like we were back in El Salvador with armed gangs prowling around. One day around the end of November, another one of my siblings paid us a visit. For once, there was no conversation to be had. Here, they said, holding out a piece of paper. Pop says you got 24 hours. Wow. So your siblings are now bullying you and tormenting you. But this is supposed to be the Christian way, which is why some families and some people want no parts of Christianity. Derek and I studied the page after my sibling left. Pops was still trying to make a deal with us outside of our formal request for just the Mad family documents and contract. It was the same deal we've seen before. He wanted to pay us $20,000 that day and have us sign an NDA that would keep us from talking about any of it. We had no intention of signing it. Our attorney maintained our request as he continued the discussion with Pops and his CPA over email. As the deadline for handing over the documentation grew closer, we started talking about the next step, possibly obtaining a court order to gain the release of the documents we were requesting. Will it work? I asked Derek. Do you think he will give us what we're asking for? Yeah, I don't think he will let it go to that point. It was late and the boys were asleep and I was feeling cold, but my shivering was nothing to do with the temperature. It was raw fear. How do you know? Because what we're asking for is perfectly reasonable. Because we have a right to them and it makes sense to anyone who looks at it objectively, including a judge or jury. Derek excelled because Pops values the show and wouldn't want all of this to be public and jeopardize the show. For months, I've been trying to hold in all the fear and sorrow. There was nobody I could talk to about it apart from our therapist, and at times those therapy sessions were like jumping into a frozen lake. We'd be discussing some of the recent difficulties with Pops and exploring how it related to parts of my upbringing, and all the blood would be rushing in my ears. My thoughts would spiral so much that I'd mainly remember those sessions with Ray like a dream. I could feel myself unraveling. All my edges were frayed. Throughout my whole life, I had my family around me, and IBLP had preached the importance of the immediate core family relationships always being prioritized above relationships with others. That's to keep them bound, causing some to still define them as immediate and prioritize them above all relationships well into marriage. Now, most of them were against me. I wasn't built for this. I experienced stress and trauma before, some of it caused by individuals in my family, but I'd always been able to count on the rest for support. They had been my gravity, the force that I had never had to question and could always rely upon. But now it felt like they were gone. Some were still there, but it was different and more distant than before. They didn't know how to handle it either. Despite having my own wonderful family of 4, there was part of me that felt all alone. I had no frame of reference for dealing with that. I woke up one night to the sound of the storm door opening. Someone started hammering at the door. It was 12:15 a.m. My heart was instantly hammering in my chest. I was freaking out, reaching for Derek. He was groggy at first, but when the doorbell rang, he shot up out of bed. Wait, I hissed as he headed out the room. Who is it? Are they seriously breaking in? I was at the window. I couldn't see who was out there, but there was a car out on the street, a car I recognized. It's Mom's car, I said, and whoever had been hammering and knocking on the door gave up and turned around and walked back to the car. It was Mom. She'd never done anything like that before. Nobody in my family had, and I stared out the window at her, frozen. I watched her go. The adrenaline took hours to leak from my body. Neither of us could figure out why'd she come, but a long 15 minutes later, after she'd been gone a while and we were climbing back into bed, unable to sleep, we got a text. Jill and Derek, we love you all. I took the Discovery contract in its entirety to your house late last night. I apologize for going by so late. I left in between your screen door and your front door with hearts, Mom. Wow, I'm surprised. Sure enough, when we opened the door in the morning, there was an envelope wedged at the base of the storm door. Inside was a copy of the contract from 2014, all 30 pages of it. They hadn't worked it out through our attorney like we requested, but we were glad to have it in hand now. And a part of me felt like them bringing it over may have been a last-minute emotional decision, which may have not happened if they waited. We spent most of the morning studying the contract. Derek had to translate some of the legal language for me, but there was plenty in it that I didn't need help with, like Part 3 titled Compensation. It stated that for each half-hour episode, Mad Family Inc. would be paid $50,000, and for each 1-hour episode, $65,000, with the numbers rising to $58,000 to $73,000 as the show hit the 4th season. Pops later determined somehow that each child will receive 3% on their tax return each year. However, even this was a phantom payment, seemingly just reported on paper for tax purposes with no apparent intention to actually pay out this amount. We would later be told that this previously reported income was an investment or inheritance that we would only have access to upon parents' death. We did the numbers. Over the years, that had been well over 300 shows. for which was estimated that TLC had paid Mad Family Inc. over $8 million total. Our wedding alone had netted well over $100,000 for Pops, and Israel's birth had been the focus of 2 special episodes, earning Pops another 6-figure sum. Yet, when we asked him to cover our $10,000 deductible and out-of-pocket expenses from the hospital stay, he pushed back. So y'all got paid for her birth, a 6-figure total, and you weren't willing to pay a $10,000 bill? Over the years, Pops had bought more and more properties, and his fleet of private aircraft now contained multiple airplanes, including one with 10 seats. There was no denying that he was a generous man who had helped a lot of people, but it was also true that he'd grown rich off the show and had fought hard to keep that under wraps. It was hard to face the reality that my own father had seemingly tricked me one day of my wedding rehearsal into signing such a document. While we were emailing our attorney about the contract, one of my siblings called me. They sounded excited and wanted me to know that they had talked with Pops and that he was suddenly ready to pay the $130,000. They explained that he had some conditions, like wanting to handle it in the house without our attorney and have us sign an NDA. I thanked my sibling for their thoughtfulness, but reminded them that we had already tried working things out on multiple occasions with Pops without an attorney, and that our only current request via the attorney was still not fully met, as we were still lacking the other Mad Family documents. I told them that at this point, we would just prefer that Pops communicate with our attorney to get those to us. It wasn't until January that things were finally resolved. We got some, but not all of the Mad Family documents, since they were missing some. And our attorney had spent weeks going back and forth negotiating the final settlement. We didn't sign an NDA or anything of that nature, obviously, because we're reading it. And though we hadn't asked for what we felt was the true value of what I had provided to the show, at least it would help me to recover what was owed to me that had previously been reported on my taxes, plus covering attorney fees, as well as buying me out of my shares and future profits of Mad Family Inc. Once I signed, I drove to our attorney's office to collect the check, the first of 5 monthly installments. I sat in the car, check in my bag, and exhaled. $175,000 was a lot of money, but I wondered if I would even make a dent in the Mad Family Inc. bank. No, you wouldn't. Not adding the $8 million. We could have asked for more, I suppose, but we hadn't wanted to be greedy. We just wanted to recover some of what was owed for the work we had done, and maybe also send a message that our contribution to the show, along with my siblings, should be valued. So we won. We got what we wanted, but I wasn't in the mood for celebrating. I felt like maybe my parents and most of my siblings thought I was greedy, and that Derek and I were horrible people for what we'd done to the family. Maybe they were right. I never knew that victory could feel so hollow or so overwhelmingly sad. You guys tell me if you think 5 payments of $175,000 was a lot of money. You let me know, because I don't think that they even put a dent in it. And I think sometimes certain things can't be bought and paid for. I like that they didn't have an NDA. I like that this book is exposing things. I want more to come out about this. And I want this to be covered more. And I want TLC to be held accountable too. Because the fact that this man was able to do this and that they couldn't help do certain things like provide the documentation that the other missionary group was asking for just seems wrong to me. Before I forget, Lisa, happy birthday, boo. Or, well, never mind. Your is going to be happy belated because I'm not posting this until Saturday. But Lisa's birthday is on February 9th, which is Friday. And I just want to say happy birthday to you. I appreciate you so much for you sitting there and you watching my videos as you sleep, helping me in the algorithm. all the times you've shared the video and things of that nature. And along with that, thank you to all of you all who continue to watch and listen. I've said it before, it means so much to me and I enjoy our times together. If you have not done so already, please like the video, please comment, and please subscribe. And until next time.